Hey, Tapu, namaste. This is Kasarkma Keparu here, and I want to talk to you today about an important subject, which is the movie Wonder Woman and its profound message. Now, I just got an opportunity to watch the film recently. I didn't see it actually in the theaters, but I did stream it and see it. And the film was very interesting, and I found myself getting caught up in the meaning behind the story, the whole mythology of Ares and Zeus and everything which the story goes through. Now, as a kid, I loved watching Wonder Woman with Linda Carter. I think my brother loved it more than I did. So I was looking forward to this movie and wondering how they would actually play it. But I was really pleasantly surprised that the storyline was very deep and had a profound message. And unfortunately, I don't think a lot of people are going to get it or understand what's going on. But I want to tie that into what's going on now and kind of like have you understand the spiritual implications of what that movie is trying to convey. Now in the movie, you know, Wonder Woman, Diana Prince, she's an Amazonian woman on this island called Paradise Island, and she leaves to fight Ares. And her idea of what she thinks that if she can kill Ares, who she believes causes the wars in the world, that it will stop mankind's wars, killing each other, mistreatment of each other. Now she teams up with Steve Trevor. He's a soldier. And so, you know, Steve Trevor's not buying the whole Ares thing at first, you know. So I'm going to let you know that there are going to be some spoilers here, all right? So if you haven't seen the movie, you can stop watching right now, okay? So they work in tandem to try and locate Ares, who is disguising himself, you know. And along the way, you know, Steve is you know, he imparts to Wonder Woman this idea, which is a seed and starts to blossom within her so she can have a greater understanding of what's going on, because she's very naive. And what Steve says is really profound too, is he says that it may not be that Ares is the personification of one man. Ares may be, in fact, an idea that we all possess, because we all may be responsible for the crimes of the world. And of course, Wonder Woman rejects that idea because she thinks Ares has to be personified as one individual, evil, corrupt, that's influencing everybody, which is why the world is the way it is. So anyway, along the way, at first she realizes that Steve may be right, but then she finds out there actually is an Ares, and she battles Ares, and Ares actually tells her this. He says, listen, I want you to join me. And the other thing is, I'm not really the cause of all the war and the harm and destruction of the planet. I merely influence them, but they have free will to do whatever they want. So you can kill me, but the wars will continue. So she does battle with Ares, and she wins, but she also is more enlightened in the process, because she realizes that she's fighting an ideology. She's fighting a nature within people to do evil. So she sets out on a quest at the end to fight the evildoers, and that's going to be her mission. Now, what's the profound message there? Well, I want you to understand something. We're being taught in our society through a polarization type frame, meaning it's the Hegelian dialectic. If you're not familiar with that, please look it up. It talks about that you're only looking at the world in two perspectives: good, evil, white, black, left, right, up, down. We are not looking at things in a proper perspective. This again comes from the fact that we have walked away from our ancient way of thinking, because that ancient way of thinking built great monuments, built civilizations like Egypt, Rome, Greece. And the way they were able to build those great civilizations was through whole brain thinking or integrated brain thinking. And I mean, you may have heard me talk about this in previous videos, left, right brain. But when you are merging your left and right brain, you have integrated brain thinking. And what that does is it doesn't allow you to see anything as opposing you or as evil. You understand? Because right now, the way we are, we're polarized in the left brain, which separates, defines, and labels, and it cannot see the connection between things. You know, the right brain is more congregative, or it brings things together, and it looks not necessarily at external things, but those things that are within, and it finds the connection. For example, we can look at external things and say you're black, you're white, you're Chinese, you're Korean, you're Indian, but if you are working through whole brain thinking, then you understand that, hey, realistically, those are just the vehicle to experience this fourth dimensional plane. But in reality, we are all consciousness. And there is only one consciousness with the illusion of individuality for the purpose of linear space-time. Because to experience linear space-time, beginning, middle, and end, there has to be individualization. There has to be separatism. There has to be objects to which you can interact with to gain the experience from. So the idea now that they have created through this left brain thinking is that there is an evil that we must fight. Again, going back to one-on-one, we've personified the evil is it the Muslims? Is it North Korea? Is it Russia? You know, we're always creating this villain because that's what left brain thinking does. That's how it operates. But when you start to integrate the brain thinking, and a lot of this also is comes out of philosophy of India, where you have the Tetra Lama, which talks about holding a positive and a negative premise and accepting both without looking at them as opposites or diametrically opposed to one another. And if you go back to the ancient Egyptian story of Asar and Aset, you'll see that in that story, Haru, which was Isis or Aset's son, did battle with Set, the evildoer. And in that, he had to go to Tahuti, or thought, to gain wisdom, and Tahuti is symbolized by integrated or right brain thinking, in order to win the battle against Set. Because every time he fought Set, it ended in a stalemate. So when he went to Tahuti, which we can also say is our third eye, gave him wisdom, knowledge to defeat Set. Now, when we look at our higher institutions, the universities, when we look at mass media marketing, mass marketing, when we look at Hollywood, it is all the premise of everything that we are intaking or being brainwashed by is the idea of polarized thinking, left brain thinking. So you go to the voting booth and you vote for either a Democrat or a Republican. You know what I mean? They tell you that some things make you sick and some things make you well. We always are looking at the effects, but never the cause. And in the ancient Chinese, in the Kemetic religion, one of the wonderful things that they did was they looked at things in a cosmological perspective, which is Ma'at. Ma'at is holistic thinking. So a cosmological perspective, or a traditional African perspective, looks at and says, if this person is doing wrong, what did society do to create this individual? And if this person is doing wrong, what hole do they have in them? What are they looking to fulfill? That if we help them fulfill that, it will bring them back into balance. So it's not about the punishment. It is not about seeing that person as evil, but it's saying there is there is something wrong with the machine. There's a wrench in the machine. Let's fix it to bring it into operation. But what you see in society, if you see someone who's addicted to drugs, they're looked at as degenerates and outcasts. We're not seeing that, hey, you know what? These opiates and all the things that this person is addicted to were given to them by doctors. So it is our society that is responsible for this person's addiction. You know what I mean? You have people who are addicted to other drugs, and you'll say, well, they're just like, they're weak individuals. No, you have a society that stresses you out, a society that is not fair, that is not based on equality for all. And what happens is some people, you know, can't take it. They're pushed to the max, you know, and then they succumb to alcoholism, drug addiction. And so then we want to place blame on them, but we don't want to look at society and say, what does society do to foster this type of behavior? And what I think Wonder Woman does is beautiful in the sense that the film looks at, hey, We are all responsible for this. And I think Wonder Woman, played by Gal Gadot, she did a wonderful job in the film. I was surprised because I didn't have a lot of faith in her originally when she was in Superman, Batman versus Superman or whatever. She says that I'm not responsible for this because I guess she thinks that she was on Paradise Island and she was separated from the rest of mankind. So she, has she's not culpable for what's going on. But the idea is, if you understand the 100 monkey principle, meaning that there's a psychic connection between every little thing, and tying that into the butterfly effect, that what happens thousands of miles away, a butterfly flapping his wings, affects things here, and we know that thoughts are transferable state. The energy that you are emitting is a vibration, and it affects people far and wide. Since we talked about earlier consciousness, we all share the same consciousness. There's no individual consciousness. That my thoughts do impact your thoughts. So Wonder Woman had a very profound message, because we cannot have a society that's constantly looking for this personification of evil. Like every time we turn around, it's taking a different form. Osama bin Laden, like these terrorists over here, the serial killer there. And if we continue to address the effects and not the cause, it will consistently happen, as in the case of Haru battling Seth and coming to a stalemate. We have to have a holistic way of thinking, to where we look at the underpinnings of what causes such behavior in society. And when you get to the root of it, you have to understand it is the mental mind conditioning of the matrix, to where we only want to look at things from this left brain perspective. I'm right, you're wrong. We never accept duality in life. We can never accept the fact that, hey, there could be two things that may seem to oppose one another, but they can be harmonious to each other's existence. There can be an interdependence and interconnectedness between the two, that one needs the other. But we don't have that type of ideology. Hence is why you'll find you have your white supremacists, your individuals like Hitler who want to commit mass genocide, because they cannot understand that one thing can complement the other, and it can coexist, and that one thing is essential for the other thing to operate by. This is why the goddess Ma'at and the ancient Egyptian philosophy talked about the interdependence and interrelationship between all things in life, that nothing is separate, everything is dependent upon one another to exist in this ecosystem. But we are influenced by those who claim to be enlightened, who are leading the government and the country and the world, and constantly programming us through social engineering to accept left brain ideology. I mean, when I was in college, I knew something was wrong, because the subject matters, the things that we learned about, and it wasn't just things that were being taught from a Western perspective and didn't include the idea that mathematics may have originated in an Arab, in the Muslim countries or whatever. But the idea that the framework from which we operate from is inherently flawed. Einstein said you can't solve a problem using the same mindset that created it. So the minute you start to label, define, separate, categorize things, you've already created a great sin. The idea of race was created to enslave people. The idea of racism was created from a left brain perspective as a virus to separate, divide, and create factions so they could fight against one another. And when you look at the whole idea of what Wonder Woman was talking about, how Aries was just whispering in people's ears to influence them, but we have free will, that's exactly what's going on now, because we have these institutions which are merely just influencing, but we're going along with the process, and as so we're going along with our own destruction. And this was the warning that the movie Wonder Woman talked about. What the movie talked about was that we all have to accept responsibility for what is going on. We cannot blame it on one individual and say that he or she is the cause of the ills of the world. All right? No, it is a framework, a mindset from which we are operating from. It's like an operating system in a computer. We need to purge it because it's a virus and it's causing havoc within the system, you know? And a lot of this has been created by the social engineering institutions that want to divide the planet and create a battle and create friction. So the more you divide the people, the easier it is to control the people. And this is never more present than in George Orwell's book, 1984. And I want you to understand something. What he talked about, and I don't want people to focus on the wrong thing, because a lot of people talk about the New World Order or going into a world, a George Orwellian world. We're not talking about a police state. We're not talking about a militarized occupation and eliminating of your rights. What we are talking about is a further extension of the left brain thinking, where left brain is verbal discourse, is oratory skills. And what they want to do is they want to play with words and ideology to get you to accept the idea that your enslavement is actually your freedom. Newspeak, to twist words and twist definitions and ideologies so that you go along with your enslavement. You're totally 100% okay with it. That's the plan. It is the enslavement of the mind to get you to fight for your slavery or your oppression, all right? Now, there's some things that Wonder Woman, I think, didn't get right. You know, I think at the very end of the film, they went back to the default storyline, which is, again, polarizing thought, because her idea was, okay, well, you know, evil is a physical act. It is an act of maybe you robbing a store, robbing a bank. Yes, but that is the effect, the cause. Again, we need to look at the underpinnings of what creates that type of behavior so that we cannot put people in jail, but to correct that in society so that the balance can be restored. That is the key, and that is looking at things from a cosmological, moral perspective. If going back to Ma'at, her husband was Tahuti. Ma'at is the law, Tahuti is wisdom. You must have the law, but you also must have wisdom in understanding how to apply the law, or she get into dogma, you know. When wisdom is not just the acquisition of book smarts or book knowledge, but wisdom is a dynamic, fluid way of thinking, which Ma'at talks about: to know truth, you must live light. Wisdom is experiential learning or experiential wisdom. So going back to Wonder Woman, it's if you haven't seen the film, go check it out. It's very entertaining. I mean, but please pay attention to the message. Take your kids and talk to your kids about the message. You know, and so they start to understand that we're living in a left brain world. And as you know, I've talked about this before, about how the world was on a certain course, but the timeline has changed, meaning that there was a time when things like the stellar or the moon cult was the dominant cult. Then it turned to the solar cult, which is solar. We symbolize that by external left brain thinking. And moon and stellar stars are more of the right brain thinking, the subconsciousness, because the right brain deals with trance, meditation, morality, things of that nature. But we cannot have the left or the right brain without each other. They must work in tandem. They must work harmoniously. They must be integrated for us to understand how to properly perceive the world. Because when you're looking at things from purely a right brain perspective, then you miss a lot of things. If you're looking at the world purely from a left brain perspective, then you miss a lot of things. And consequently, your perceptions, the way you see things, actually, when you are, the left and right brain are merely filters. So if you are filtering out certain things, you're actually creating a different type of reality that you're experiencing, and that reality may be skewed. Hence is what we have today. We have war. We have separatism. We have conflict based on race and religion. And guess where it's coming from? It's coming from our mode of thinking. So in my sense, in the way I see and perceive things, is that the universities are responsible for what is happening in the world, because they are purely, they're based purely on book knowledge, book learning, left brain. You cannot go into a major university and start talking about intuiting wisdom and knowledge from within through a right brain meditative process. They will reject you. The scholars will be, you know, the academic scholars will be like, they'll ostracize you basically, because this society has not spiritually evolved to the point where it can understand that it's sick, that it has a cancer, and this cancer is eating at it, and you can't find the cure for this cancer using the same thing that caused the cancer. So I want you to look at the film Wonder Woman in the sense of how we can help society as a whole and deal with what is going on in this. Because every time we have a president, every time we have a new political party, it's always a war. And they always want to frame it as such, so-and-so is the enemy. Here's the enemy. This is what we must fight for in order to instill freedom and liberty. But these individuals are sick in the head. And if they continually want to frame something, somebody as the enemy, when they themselves are the ones that are the cause of this. And in the story, I'm going to leave you with this. Well, actually, let me touch on this other point too. The point that I think that Wonder Woman fails at is that instead of fighting Ares and basically defeating him, killing him, the way that stories need to evolve to understand that Ares is an essential part of who you are, Wonder Woman. So you need Ares and Ares needs you. So you cannot eliminate something that is an essential component for the whole to operate. Do you understand what I mean? And that's a very advanced spiritual way of thinking. You cannot destroy something merely because you think it opposes you. In actuality, nothing can oppose you because we're all one. So you cannot oppose yourself. You understand? So in the story of Osiris Set, when Haru defeated Set, he didn't kill Set, but he cast Set to the underworld so that Set could clear the barge that would travel through the underworld, clearing the way for the barge to move. So Set had an essential role, and he could fulfill that role, and that need that he had was fulfilled. So at the end, when Wonder Woman eliminated Ares, it kind of then, you know, went off in the wrong direction, but it's still the message before that was important to understand that the villain that we seek is not one thing, it's in all of us in terms of the way that we are filtering and perceiving the world. And again, let me stress this. It is the major institutions that are influencing us and getting us to think a certain way in this mental mind matrix, which is causing the problem. Because the minute that we all realize what the issue is and start to work on integrating our thought process and not seeing someone as the enemy, or not seeing this grand battle of good versus evil, but one being a necessary part of the whole, then things change on the planet. Everything changes. It's a whole new world. And it's possible. But it has to first begin with our thinking. And then that energy will vibrate outward and affect many people far and wide. So I hope you've enjoyed this message. If you like this video, like it down below and subscribe to my channel for more videos. And until then, this is Kisak Ma Keperu and Amun Ra.